little bit about myself. In the early 1970s, my father decided to move our family to a small town in Central Texas. And at the time, my father had just retired from the National Football League. He was a professional football player for the St. Louis Cardinals. And my mom didn't like the idea of moving to a small town called Killeen, Texas. 4 hours away from that town where she grew up was Arlington, and Arlington is where her family lived. And as a kid, I just wanted to be around other kids and have the parents that loved me, you know? My dad promised my mom 2 years we would be in Killeen, Texas, and he would move her back to Arlington. 2 years. And so we moved. One of the most cherished memories for me in Killeen, Texas was my dad every summer would pick up the phone and he would call the trainer of the St. Louis Cardinals and he'd have him ship an authentic NFL football to our house. It was the coolest thing. From the time I got home until dark, you could catch me in the front yard with that football. That 2 years turned into 7. And one day my dad came home early from work and he asked me and my brother to come into the living room. And I remember sitting down on that olive green couch as I looked at my dad and he started to speak. And I knew he was saying something important, but everything slowed down. And I'm watching his mouth, and with tears running down, I looked at my dad and I said, "What do you mean, Mom's not coming home?" For a 9-year-old kid, it's hard to understand what that word divorce meant. And I walked upstairs and I grabbed that football from my dresser. And I got into bed. And I held on to that football so tight. Like it was a life raft in the middle of an ocean. I felt alone. I felt scared. For many nights after that, I held on to that football. But I developed a pattern as a result of what happened. I didn't want anyone to tell me what to do. I wanted to figure out life on my own. So 23 years ago when I got in the mortgage business, I used those patterns the first 7 years of my life. I wanted to figure out how to do this on my own. I didn't want anyone to tell me what to do. For 7 years, I struggled in the mortgage business. The most I'd ever made was $200,000. But in 2009, I joined an organization that totally transformed my life. And when you make a decision like joining an organization like Go Coaching, you're going to find some resistance just like I did. 2 months after starting with this coaching program, I got fired. And I remember calling my coach, Brendan Donaldson, and I said, "Brendan, what are we going to do?" He said, "You're going to do exactly what I say, and together you and I are going to get through this." And I'll never forget driving home, thinking, how am I going to tell my wife we're $200,000 in credit card debt, living in a house that I can't afford, and I just lost my job. And I pull up to the driveway, and I get out of the car and open up the back door, and there she is, standing there as I walked in the door. That football was in her hand, and she said, "Look what I found." And I just lost it. We borrowed $50,000 from her 401k. That year I made more than $100,000 that I'd ever made in my life. The next 4 years were some of the best 4 years of my life, and I became a coach with that organization. I spent 10 years with that organization. And then those patterns showed back up again. A year ago, I knew I had to make a decision. If I wanted to finish my career in the mortgage business, I had to align myself with an organization that understood what a modern loan officer looked like. I signed up for one of the mayor's master classes. Anybody take one of those? And then I signed up for more information with Shara. And she said a name that many of you will know. But when she said that name, Larry Montani, I said, let's fucking go!